Hi, and welcome to another episode of Career Reshaped. I'm your host, Natasha, and today I am welcoming Leah Evans to the channel. Leah is a digital product manager and a previous client of ours. Leah has experience in financial services, professional services, and e-commerce. She has a passion for working with diverse talent to build products that solve real user problems. Hey, it's Natasha.
And I'm Pauline.
We're so pumped to bring you even bigger and better stuff this season 2 of Career Reshaped.
We've got new guests, free masterclasses, and all the good vibes you'll only find here.
So don't forget to hit subscribe, follow us on Spotify at Career Reshaped,
and check us out on Instagram at my.career.angels.
Hi Leah, thanks for joining.
Hello.
So I read your lovely intro, and it's really exciting to have someone in the digital space for product management. So I'd love to know how you got into it, how it all started for you.
Yeah, so I started at Westpac when I was quite young. So I was lucky enough to get a cadetship with them. So I had the opportunity to work in quite a few different teams, working as like an associate business analyst. I was in a strategy team at some point, and that's when I came across product and I absolutely fell in love with it. I was working in the mobile banking space, and it was amazing because compared to the other roles that I had, I just felt like it was very fulfilling working with a lot of different people, and I actually had a tangible outcome to all of the work that I was doing. So that's kind of when it started. I might not say my age, but I'd say it was back in 2020, I'd say 2019. Yeah, so a few years ago. But yeah, since then I've loved it, and I've worked at a few other companies since then working in product, and I'm really happy that that's what I'm doing now.
Awesome. So I will have a question regarding what you're doing more recently, but you mentioned the cadetship. So I'm actually interested to know, is this something you would suggest to people coming out of uni to do something like that, a cadetship or a graduate program?
100%. I think the thing that happens is that when you're in high school, the main focus is, okay, making sure you get a good ATAR and then getting into the uni you want, doing the course you want. But the unfortunate thing is a lot of people don't realize that what employers are looking for, even at such a young age, is actual experience. And it is really hard when you try to apply for roles after you finished uni when you don't have any kind of really directly relatable experience. So I think, any day I would say go for cadetships if you are at that point, and even like things like co-ops as well, anything that gives you a little bit of experience. And I actually started doing this in high school because I was just very excited to get experience, and which, it's a little bit cringeworthy, but I would like actively approach people at like career fairs and things like that and just ask them like, would you be happy if I came and did a week or even 2 of work experience with you? And that wasn't part of the normal high school program. I just wanted to.
That's not part of the normal high school student mindset at all.
It's not. And
But that's amazing.
it is. And the thing is, for me, initially, I used to be obsessed with law and order. So I wanted to become a lawyer. So I actually went to a few law firms just offering my free labor. Not that I could really do much, but just so I could see, okay, what is it actually like working as a lawyer? And that actually gave me the insight that made me realize, I don't really want to do this. And that's when I pivoted to something different, did some research, and IT was what interested me at the time. And then I did more work.
I love that. Yeah, I love that you did the volunteering. And yes, TV shows can be really persuade you to do certain things. I also like Criminal Minds, and the Profilers. Not that I could ever do that or see those crime scenes, but they really do persuade people. And I love that you offered your time to volunteer. It's actually something we tell a lot of our clients to do, that if you're not sure if you're going to love it, volunteer. Just do it once a week, see if it's something you enjoy. And I love that you had that mindset so early on. It is rare, but it's fantastic that you did that. I did it actually when I was in high school. I thought I wanted to be a primary school teacher. So I went outside of the school and I volunteered to be in a classroom. I think it was for about a week. I loved it. I didn't end up doing teaching, clearly. I'm teaching people now. I'm teaching adults in a different way, but it really gives a really solid insight. So good on you for actually doing that. It's impressive.
Yeah.
Fast forward to where we are now. So I know that you had a few hurdles to overcome and a few challenges. Did you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Generally in my career, there's been a few. I guess the big thing was kind of figuring out what it was that I wanted to do. And that was obviously a little bit earlier on part of the cadetship. And what I did to sort of overcome that was speaking to a lot of people. I asked quite a few people in spaces that I thought seemed interesting, and people who had roles and positions where I was like, oh, that could be something that I would love to do one day. Just asking for advice, getting as much information as I could so I could really make an informed decision. So that was like a big one in the beginning for me, because I feel like there's a lot of pressure to decide what it is that you want to do. But I guess, yeah, I don't know if we want to go specifically into roles.
I love that you knew that it's hard to decide exactly what you want to do coming out of high school, but you had that cadetship, which really opened the door for a lot of different things. So you knew that digital space was what you wanted. And I know that you enjoyed your time in the financial sector, but you moved on from there.
Yeah.
So moving on from there, you went to do something else and you were in a completely different space. So I guess I'd like to know how transitioning to something completely different went for you, and how maybe culture had an impact on your decision making from there on.
Yeah, so I think in terms of like, because I have changed industries quite a few times. I do know a lot of other product managers do tend to stay within the same sort of space, but the way I see it, and I don't know if this is applicable to other careers. I'm sure there's some that could also relate to this, but the skills are very transferable. The difference when you do switch careers is mainly in terms of like I'd say like the jargon that people use, understanding the context of the product. Even the product itself will change quite a lot, but I personally do really enjoy that challenge, and I did want to push myself more, get that growth. So I think having that mindset really did help with any challenges that did come up as part of that switch between industries. On a culture front, I think culture is such an important thing in any company or team. It really does make or break the experience for you. And I've been lucky enough in most of my roles to have been placed in really good teams, very supportive ones. Obviously, that doesn't happen all the time. And it is really hard when you're applying for a role to really get a gauge of the culture, because that is also subject to change. Once you do start in a role, people move around, management changes. So yeah, I think for me, definitely like navigating some cultural challenges has come up in the past few years. And it was a interesting learning experience, but I think something that it's an important part of career development, learning how to adapt to different cultures.
So what techniques did you initiate for yourself to try to adapt and try to push through any boundaries or any culture blockages?
I think the first thing was just having an open mind, and trying not to hold on too much to, I guess, like previous habits and previous like even ways of socializing that I would have in other companies and other industries when I did start a new role. And I do that always, because every company and even industry is quite different. Um, that would be the main thing. And I think even just connecting with as many people as you can, just so that you can understand how things work. How people connect, I think, is a really big thing as well.
So when you say changing the way you socialize, obviously being adaptable is good. And when you look at most job ads, they want someone who is adaptable. I guess with your experience and the difficult environments that you have had in the past, would you say that that is completely fair to completely change the way you socialize with people and interact with people? Or should there be a balance and some, I guess, accountability from the business as well?
It's definitely a mix of both. I think there's only so far anyone can go when it comes to adapting to a particular culture. But I do think, yeah, you've got your differences, and I think that's where you do need to be a little bit adaptable. But in terms of whether it's a healthy culture and unhealthy culture, I think for anyone, it's important to obviously be able to, because you can't always just leave a role. For example, if the role is not, let's say, healthy from a cultural perspective. So you do need to kind of adapt a little bit, just tide you over. But at the same time, I definitely do think it's up to companies to really make sure that the culture that they are actually, I guess, it is realistic. And if it's not, then taking some active action to make sure that people are embracing like a positive work culture, because it's the one reason, and I've seen this so many times, when people leave a role, it's never really because of the work. The culture, I think 90% of the time, is the reason why people will leave.
So you mentioned just before about knowing the culture that you're kind of stepping into. So you coming from a few different industries, were there any techniques that you looked into, like maybe during the interview process or when researching the companies, to try to figure out whether it would be a positive culture or one that you don't necessarily have to adapt so much to?
I think the one thing would be, firstly, if I knew people at that company, I would definitely reach out to them. That's not always an option. So for me, one thing that I found was it gave quite a good insight into the actual values and the culture of a company, was looking at their like values, the ones that they do actually post, because there were some that I noticed were quite generic and they just didn't feel very genuine. But there were also quite a few others where I guess they were more genuine. I can't think of a better term
You
to
can, yeah,
describe.
you can tell it wasn't just a chat GTP, but they actually wrote it themselves.
Exactly. And you would also see
Yeah.
sort of, for example, like the social events they would organize, groups and committees that they had in place that would actually, it kind of aligned with the corporate culture that it looked like they were saying that they had. So if there's ways of like getting that insight, I think that really does help getting an insight into the company as well and what it's actually like to work there. But during the interview itself, it's always quite hard. I think the first thing is that the people are a great reflection of the culture, but there's only so much you can see during the interview. But I guess there are certain questions that I would ask in terms of whether the team like comes in, for example, if everyone's in the same sort of office space, just things like that, which do go a long way and actually, firstly, make sure there is a culture, and secondly, seeing how that culture actually works.
Yeah, those are good, definitely really good questions. There are a bunch of questions that can be asked in an interview, and understanding the team is definitely one, understanding the management style. Obviously, in an interview, they may not tell you everything, especially if they know themselves that there are issues. But then you look at the body language and whether they shift a little bit too much in their seat or their voice maybe goes a little bit higher. the indication of some little fibs there. So you mentioned seeing if you know somebody that works in the organization. And I think that is a great piece of advice to give to people. If you go on LinkedIn and you can see that you have mutual connections, even if you don't know the person really well, but you are actually connected to them on LinkedIn, or you have mutual friends, you can reach out and say, hey, I noticed that we have this friend in common. I also noticed that you're working at so and so. Could you tell me a bit about it? There's a job opening and I'm interested. So I think that's definitely a great way of trying to get insider gossip about the organization and to really know whether it's worth it. And anyone that's happy will be really happy to share the information. And the same goes the opposite way. If someone's really unhappy, they'll tell you as well and be even more brutally honest about it. So that's really good advice to give. Now, you also did mention that not everyone can leave a place that they're working at if it is a toxic work environment, but they can't just get up and go. They need to find other employment first, or they're in a situation where they can't leave. They have too many expenses in life, and that does happen. And I guess I know that what happened for you when you reached out to us, you were in a point where you did want to move on from where you were going, but you couldn't just get up and go because you had your expenses and everything like that. So what did you do in the workplace, but also outside of the workplace, to try to, I guess, keep your mental health a little bit more balanced?
I think the big thing was definitely having a support network, because whether the culture is good or bad, it's something that you always need. And especially when things aren't going too well, for me, the one thing that really, really helped was having a really great support network, because that particular company I was at, there were a lot of people who were great. And having that really, really did help, because I think feeling isolated when you're in a situation like that just makes things so much worse. So if you don't have a support network, like definitely try to build one, because it's not always easy to just get up and go. And I think also from a professional perspective, like sometimes it isn't the best option if you've only been at a certain role for a small while to just leave. But definitely the support network went a long way. In terms of like mental health and just making sure I stayed positive, I think it was also looking at doing things outside of work as well that would kind of, almost counteract some things that were happening at work. So for me personally, like I'm fairly creative, so I would do things like painting, spending time with like friends, family, even like getting into sports as well. Well, not really sports. I don't do sport actually. I don't know why. But like physical activity. So going to the
Walking, sport.
yeah, same thing.
Same thing, totally.
Yeah,
For me, it is.
exactly. But things that are just completely removed from that environment, that get your body physically into a different state just so that you can refresh. And the one thing as well is like if things aren't going well in like a certain area, so at the time for me it was professionally, because the culture was just, yeah, I would say fairly toxic, and not just for me but for quite a few other people as well. When things aren't going well in a certain area, so for me at the time it was with work, looking at other areas in your life, because your identity isn't just based in, you know, how well you're doing at work or even how you're being received at work and what that environment is like. So for me it was about obviously still making sure I was doing the best job I could do in that circumstance, but looking at other parts of my life, like with my friends, with my family, the creative things, you know, not sport but physical, some kind of physical activity, like going for runs and things like that. And when I started seeing those areas of my life sort of going well and investing time in that, it made work and kind of what was happening at the time, which I couldn't control, seem a little bit less intense, I guess.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about identity. And we've mentioned this before on this show that a person's identity is huge, and it's how they see themselves. And you've got, if you go to the whole psychology of the id and the ego and all of that, but when people think of themselves, first think about their career.
Yeah.
And it becomes a huge part of their life. And they're like, and they go, oh, and tell me about yourself. And they'll say, oh, well, I'm a career coach. But that's not all of who I am. You know, a digital product manager is not all of who you are. So it's really good that you were able to disconnect and see that, well, that's not my whole identity. My identity is the rest of my life. It's my friends, it's my family, it's the things that I enjoy doing outside of work. And personally, I think that that's what people need to focus on more, especially for their mental health. Work is work. And yes, we need the money and all of that. And ideally, you wake up happy to go to work.
Yeah.
You know, you love what you do. Like with you, Leah, you know, you love the actual work. You love what you do. You love the customer service. You love creating the platforms and making it easier for the users. And I think that's great. But when the culture or the toxic environment starts to seep in, there's only so much passion for the work that you can keep holding on to. And so stepping out of that and seeing, okay, well, I have this in my life and that. And for some people, it's their kids or their dog or their cat, or it is their morning walks along the beach. And that just resets them for the day. So it's really good that you were able to get to that point after feeling isolated, like you said you were feeling. So it's really good that you were able to do that. And I think that's really good advice for anyone listening, to step back for a second and look at what else you have in your life. And if you feel that you are alone, just like you said, Leah, get that support network. Go find it. Make one. If you don't have, you know, a little village, start with one person. That's all you need to begin with, one person.
It makes such a difference. And the thing is, most people are willing to help as well. And I think that's something generally that I've found, is that if you're not in a good position, or even if you just, for example, need some advice or some guidance, people are, from my experience at least, are mostly more than happy to share their insights, help out where they can. And yeah, it does make a difference. And like you said, even if it's just one person, that's huge. But yeah, I think definitely reaching out to people, because people can't help you unless they know that, you know, you're not in a good place. So I think it's that almost courage to be vulnerable sometimes. And I think it can be difficult and a bit trickier at work, because yeah, there are certain lines, but at the same time, and I'm just using like being in a very toxic workplace as an example. But generally with those kind of situations, there are other people who also know that that environment is toxic, whether it's at the company level or if it's at the team level. So they're happy to help. And I think that for me, I think without having that, it would have been extremely difficult for me. So I'm very grateful to the people who were actually able to, just have a chat, have a coffee, because it just makes a world of difference.
Yeah, that's really good. And I'm glad you had those people in your life.
Yeah.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of this topic, we just wanted to check in and say that if you believe that you need some assistance and that we could help you, reach out to us today, check out our website, join our newsletter. We'd love to be in touch. We wanted to quickly mention that subscribing to the podcast is the best way to support the show and ensure you never miss an episode. It's super easy. Just click the subscribe button whenever you're listening. Thanks for tuning in.
So it's really good to know what you did outside of the working environment with your support network and everything. I'd like to also know how you manage the day-to-day. So, on any given day, something would happen, there'd be an incident. What techniques or what did you do to get through the rest of the day?
I guess it depended on what the issue was, but generally for me, my main focus at work is the work. Like, obviously, the people are a big part of that, but at the same time, when it came to things that I would say would take away from my ability to do my job, I would try to resolve them. So it was a lot easier if it wasn't in person, but if it was over Zoom or whatnot, or Microsoft Teams, then I would just give the person a call and try to resolve it. I think and this is just generally with any kind of conflict, coming at it with empathy and understanding why the person is saying things that they are, and understanding what position they're coming from really does go a long way in just mitigating issues. And you actually appreciate why they're saying the things that they are, and it actually helps you give better responses and resolve a lot of conflicts, I would say. So for me, I would try to resolve conflicts fairly quickly whenever they did come up, using that approach. But also just reminding myself, like, at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's about the work that I'm doing. So just focusing on doing that. And that was essentially what I did, which helped me to still actually deliver quite a lot, even when the culture wasn't always 100%. And that seemed to work for me. I'm not sure if that would work for others, but
No, I think that's great advice. I think dealing with it in the moment is great. Obviously, like you said, it depends what the situation was. But if it's just a general conflict, dealing with it straight away is always good. And this is also what we tell people: try to understand their perspective. So have a conversation. And you're right, in person is so much easier, because especially if it's over email, there can be miscommunication. They can misread what you've written, which happens often. People read things in a particular tone, even though they may not have been a tone. So definitely at least picking up the phone so they can hear you is always good. So it's really good that you were able to do that for some of your situations, to deal with that and then focus on the work, and still produce, like you said, really good quality work, which is, some people struggle to do that, especially when they're in a negative environment, not just externally, but like internally, like in their head. It does affect your work. So it was good that you were able to at least separate that to a point, to still be passionate about what you're doing for the end user as well.
And I think that comes down to actually enjoying your job as well. That's why I think, going back to what we were discussing before, it is so important to make sure you actually like your job, make sure it's fulfilling for you, because you're not always going to end up in a perfect culture. Like, it's just not reasonable to be expecting that. But it does get you through. And that, for me, it definitely played such a big role as well, because I could at least get some satisfaction from the work I was doing, the results I was seeing, and all the other positive relationships I had with people as well.
So going back to when you said that you have gone to a few different industries, and that that you've got those transferable skills. Not a lot of people realize that. And like you said before, some people just get stuck in the same industry, or they think that they need to be in the same industry. Noticing your transferable skills and then going from industry to industry, were there any big issues with that? Or could you foresee any issues changing industries? And what would you tell people when focusing on their transferable skills to not be afraid, I guess, to try a different industry in the digital product management field?
Yes, I think there's two parts to it, because on the one hand, having like experience working with different industries is great if you want to be more of a generalist. And this is just speaking within product management. And there are definitely companies that actually prefer that, like seeing people who can, adapt their skills in different contexts. But at the same time, I think what you're missing out on is sort of stepping into more specialized product roles. And I do think that for me, like moving forward, and generally other product managers and people in other roles as well who are doing that, it can make it harder if you do want to sort of get into a particular industry, because quite a few of them do expect you to like potentially come in at a lower level. And I did actually have this experience once when I was applying for a role in a completely different industry. It was, I think, ops and logistics from memory. And that even though I was a product manager at this point for quite a few years, they wanted me to come in as a product analyst, just so that I could really understand the industry and learn how things work before stepping into that role. So I do think, yeah, if you're kind of happy to sort of, I guess, temporarily sacrifice seniority to try a different industry, that's fine. But if you don't, then that could be a bit of an issue. But I guess like constantly changing industries is like on that extreme is probably not a good thing as well. Like I think it is good to sort of have like build some experience as well. For me, the only reason it's happened is because in terms of the roles that came up and the ones that suited me the best, it just so happened that they're all in quite different industries. But in saying that, like at the moment, I am in professional services, but in the future, if another role comes up, a different one, still in professional services, I definitely wouldn't say no to that just because it's in the same industry, if that makes sense. Like I'd be more happy to continue working in the space.
Yeah. And I like what you said about being open to maybe taking a step down, because it's not, yeah, temporarily it's a step down, but really it will then become a leap forward because you learn the new industry and you already have the experience of a senior role. You'll quickly get promoted. It's fact. If the company doesn't quickly promote you, though, then that's something with the company. That's not on you. So I feel that it does happen when people think, okay, yeah, I'll take a lower level position to be able to take those steps up. But then they don't get promoted and they think that it's something that they've done. It's not. More often than not, it's not. It's just the company trying to hold you in that position at a lower salary, knowing that you can do more, giving you more. And that's where your negotiation and your understanding of when it is time to leave kicks in. So this is some advice for anyone listening that's in that situation. You don't deserve to be in that situation. Move on. I can help you move on. So with everything else that you were doing, I know that you also had some pressures or some guidance to even perhaps change your career completely into something else. And it was, transferable for your skills as well, but you stuck to your guns and your passions. So how did that feel when people around you were trying to tell you maybe this isn't the right path for you, or you can't do your job well, maybe do something else? How did that make you feel, and how did you get through that?
Well, for me, I'm quite stubborn. So, and especially when it comes to something as important as your career. And obviously, like I had gone through quite a few different experiences to figure out what it was that I actually wanted to do. And that's why for me, product has a very special place in my heart because I just really do enjoy it. It just ticks all the boxes for me. But yeah, there have been a few situations, but particularly when I was in a certain environment that was quite toxic, where I had people quite close to me saying, look, you've been trying to look for a new role for a while now, nothing's really come up. Maybe you should actually completely reconsider what career you're doing, and looking into jobs that are a little bit more marketable, which was a valid point. And obviously they were just coming from a place of concern because yeah, being in an unhealthy workplace is not good for anyone. And especially if you're there for a while as well, it really does start to take a toll. But at the same time, for me, I didn't want to just, I wasn't at that point where I wanted to just completely throw away everything I'd spent years working on just for some, I guess, temporary relief almost. So that's why I just decided to keep looking. And it actually turned out that the reason why I wasn't successful in applying to different roles was because the way I was doing it was quite wrong, in terms of my CV and even with interviews. And that's obviously when Natasha, you and Pauline were able to help me, and things just turned around so quickly after that. So yeah, I think if anyone else is in that situation, if you are kind of in a bit more of a niche profession, not that I think product management is super niche, but definitely compared to other roles like project management and business analysts, there are so many more roles available for them. But I would say first, like if you're not getting much success with applications, just look at your approach, see if there's a possibility that maybe you're not doing something 100%, which for most people, I think is a very big possibility, because it's not something that you really learn, how to apply for jobs and how to present interviews and all of that, which is why we have people like you, Natasha, and your sister to help out.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think it should be a subject at school or somewhere, just how to interview, how to write a resume, and not a generic resume. I've had people that have said, oh no, I was taught how to do it in uni. At uni, they've started to teach kids how to do it, or young adults, I should say. Then kids to me, but young adults. And I think, no, but that's not right either, because it's so generic. And that's fair. Whoever's teaching them has to be more generic, because they're trying to teach a whole variety of industries and different people. But I feel that if there was a subject that someone could take that was how to read a job ad, and then how to tailor your resume and cover letter for that job ad, and to research the company, how to update your LinkedIn, how to interview. Yes, this is what we do. This is what we coach our clients. But I find that it's so not fair for high school kids that are trying to get a job, even during high school, out of high school, that, you know, maybe they don't want to go to uni and they just don't know how to do it. And even adults don't know, and that's why we're around. But you're right, it's usually somewhere along the line, along your application process, you're not hitting the mark. And I love that when we do help people with that, they realize, oh, it's not me. And their confidence just goes up, because they realize, oh, I'm not presenting myself well enough, or I am downplaying my skills, because they feel that, oh, I don't want to seem like I've got a huge ego. No, it's not ego. It's a fact. This is what you're capable of. These are your achievements. You should be proud of them, and you should put them out there. So definitely, I completely agree with you, Leah. Sometimes it's the process, not that you're not capable.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think there's a really easy reality to accept, especially if you've been applying for roles for months and you're not even getting like the courtesy of a rejection email. It's just dead silence, which, unfortunately does happen quite often. But
it's deafening, isn't it?
It is. And when you're already like not in an amazing place, having all of these rejections, or almost lack thereof, but I guess just absolutely no movement, you automatically sort of think, oh, like maybe I'm applying for roles that are potentially too advanced for me, or maybe I'm not that good. But yeah, to your point, like the thing is, like if you actually are applying properly and then you're still not seeing results, then that's a different story. But I think that for a lot of people, like I didn't even know how to properly format my CV with keywords, like little things like that. And it was just that switch. And it was great to see, because before that, just there was absolutely nothing. So, but afterwards, like it was such a huge improvement.
I'm really glad to hear that. And we're thrilled that we were able to help you in that way and support you through that process as well. And I mean, we do the same care with all our clients, because your career is part of your life. So it's very serious. Like you said before, Leah, like it's important and it's a huge thing. And that's why you were, I guess, stubborn or committed to staying in the field of the product management, because you see long term, you see longevity in it, and you're passionate about it, and you're passionate about the whole process. So having little things along the way to support you and help you in little changes definitely make a huge impact. And seeing those changes improve mental health straight away, almost. You do always have that little voice at the back of your head when something goes wrong, but looking at the big picture where things are going right and things are going well, and you can see the differences and you can see the changes, I feel that helps a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'd like to ask a final question. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
I think the main thing would be I would recommend not chasing, I guess, like money, if that makes sense, because I think it's very easy when you do enter corporate, and I've seen this a lot, and I actually did this myself at a point where I would choose roles because it seemed like they had a really great salary. And at the end of the day, though, it's not like, yes, obviously we work so that we can get a salary, but you also need to make sure that firstly the role is for you. It's relying on skills that you have or gives you the opportunities for growth, it is something that you would enjoy doing as well. Because I have been in roles in the past where I was getting compensated amazingly, and that was great. But when the culture, when the role itself wasn't really something that I actually wanted to do long term, all the money in the world, at least for me, didn't justify staying in that position. So that would be the first thing I would say. But secondly, would just be to be curious. Like, I think learning and speaking to different people, doing research, even like within your own role, doing as much not personal development, professional development as you can. Like LinkedIn, for example, is a lot of micro courses or even getting more formal accreditations. Just being curious about how you can learn more about your role, the industry that you're in, really does go a long way as well. So I would definitely tell my younger self to do that even more, even though I feel like I was already doing it more than the average 18-year-old.
I was just about to say, I feel like you're the only 18-year-old that would actually listen to that advice and actually do it.
Yeah.
But it's great advice.
Yeah. But I think that would be the main things. And I think even from like a professional networking front, I did notice that, and this was even when I was at the cadetship, quite a few other people my age were too hesitant to actually reach out to people who were even slightly more senior than them, or people, for example, from different companies, because they just, I think, didn't know how to kind of interact, because we were fresh from high school, so it's a completely new space. But I think the other thing I would say would be to definitely be open to just reaching out to people, asking for career advice, even asking for people to be mentors, depending on what their capacity is. But I did that to a degree, and it really just went a long way in like improving, well, not improving, but accelerating my career growth. It was because so many people are actually happy to help out people who are younger, who are keen to learn as well. So that would be the other thing I would say as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on. That's great. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.